The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
It's coming.
All these voices. All these voices.
They're not yours. You had no right to them when you were alive, and you have no right to them when you're dead. That's what it sounded like. Good, so you know who I am. And then you know I'm not playing. You're going to let those women go. In Jesus' name, you're going to let those women go.
Is there a demon here watching us right now? Watching us right now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Staring into the Abyss. I am your host, horror author James Hershey Jr. With me, as always, my co-host, old boy James Ash. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing pretty good.
Tonight's show is going to be kind of fun and interesting. Me and my wife watch a lot of movies and shows and stuff together, and she had this one on the list that she really wanted to check out, and it was called American Ripper. So we kind of run out of things to watch, so we checked that out this week and watched the whole season. And it was very interesting because it reminded me of a show that we did like 7 years ago, something like that, about H.H. Holmes and Jack the Ripper, and whether H.H. Holmes was actually Jack the Ripper. And it was cool watching that season and seeing some of the same evidence that I presented on the show like 6 or 7 years ago coming up on the History Channel. And so we watched that, and I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit tonight, because there was some new stuff that they found in that show that nobody knew previously, which was pretty cool. Now, if you're a long-time listener or watcher or however you consume the show, whether it's YouTube or Spotify or the radio or whatever, you know that we did this show long ago. And you also know that it was my opinion that H.H. Holmes and Jack the Ripper were the same person. It has been for a long time. And I don't want to kind of rehash that show. I just kind of want to remind you, so you can go listen to it if you want. It's on YouTube. If not, that's cool. The basic conclusion that I came up with at the end of that show was that I believe that H.H. Holmes was Jack the Ripper. Okay? Now, in this season, they kind of go through a history of H.H. Holmes and a history of Jack the Ripper and how they kind of coincide. Okay? And first thing they tried to prove was whether H.H. Holmes was still in the States during the time of the Jack the Ripper murders over in London, or if he was there. So first they tried to find any evidence that he was actually here during that time, and there was none. He was not here. Then they said, okay, well, can we prove that he was in London during that time? So they went over a bunch of ship manifests and stuff like that, and different bills and stuff that he had paid for stuff over in London. And it turns out that H.H. Holmes was in London during the time period that the Jack the Ripper murders were taking place. They have his name on ship manifest traveling to and from, and they have his signature on several different bill of sales from over there during that time period. And the interesting thing is, the exact description that was given to the police was the same description that matched H.H. Holmes. And the police believed that it was an American doctor who was doing the murders, because the Ripper letters that Jack the Ripper wrote to the police, they weren't in the English slang of the time. They were in the American slang of the time. So he used words and phrases that only Americans used that were different than what the English used. That was very interesting. So come to find out, they believed that it was an American doctor that was Jack the Ripper. And they actually had another guy that they thought it might be, and they went and arrested him. But then it turned out it wasn't him, because there was proof that it wasn't him. He had a pretty rock solid alibi. He was talking to a police officer at the time of the murder, so like one of the murders, so there's no way it could have been him. And then that guy hightailed it the hell out of London right after that, which I don't blame him. And it's interesting because H.H. Holmes was a surgeon. Okay, he had surgical skills. And one thing that he did here stateside a lot was he would take his victims and he would take body parts. Like the uterus was one that was very popular because it was hard to get a hold of and it sold for a lot of money. The kidneys in some cases. He did a heart once or twice. So he would take organs from his victims and sell them to medical schools. And even whole skeletons from his victims and sell them to medical schools. And one thing that he did early on, before he started really killing a lot, was he would go and dig up fresh corpses and cut away everything and clean up the skeleton and sell the skeletons to medical schools. So then when you go to the Jack the Ripper murders, it's interesting to note that in almost all of those murders, except for 2, and those 2, I believe it's because somebody walked up right after the murder and he had to get the hell out of there. He didn't have time. But in all the other murders that took place there, they were missing like the uterus or the kidney or something like that. He would take organs and he would take them with him. And over in England, just like here in America during that time period, they would buy organs from people. Organs, skeletons, bodies, whatever, because they weren't easy to come by. And it was kind of a no questions asked kind of deal, right? They didn't like say, hey man, where do you get this body? They didn't really give a damn. They just took the body. So the thought is that he was selling organs to the medical schools over in England, just like he did here in the States before that. So they determined that he was there, and he left right after the last Jack the Ripper murder. It was within a week or 2 after that murder that he came back here. And I think the reason he came back here is because at that time, Jack the Ripper was like the most wanted man in the country, maybe the world at the time. It was a big deal, and they were really trying to figure out who the hell it was and catch the person. And the police already knew that it was an American doctor. That's what they suspected, and it turns out they were right. So he thought, man, they're hot on my trail here. I got to get the hell out of Dodge. So he bailed and came back stateside. And when he left, the Jack the Ripper murder stopped. And they never caught anybody, and they never figured it out. And they just stopped and never started back up again there. But the interesting thing is, a lot of places here in America had murders that were the same as the murders that took place in England. Okay, the Jack the Ripper murders. Same exact thing. He would suffocate them, slice their throats, slice up the face, take organs. Same exact thing, right? And they would even call them in the newspaper Ripper-style murders were taking place. And it's funny because every time one of those Ripper-style murders took place, we can place H.H. Holmes in that town or city when it took place. See, because everybody thinks he just lived in Chicago, but he traveled around quite a bit. And everywhere he went, these Ripper-style murders took place. They also found later, because he ended up building what everybody called the murder castle. When he got back from England, he started planning that. And I think the reason he started planning that is because his last victim in England, he took inside instead of outside. All the other victims were prostitutes on the street, and he would kill them there on the street and really quickly cut out what he wanted and get out of there. But the last one was actually in a room, and he had hours with her. So he really took his time, and that was the most gruesome one, because he took the uterus and the kidney, and I mean, just flayed her wide open. It was, if you've seen the photographs, it's horrifying. That picture is not pretty, but he took his time, and he could really get into what he was doing. And I think that kind of sparked something in his brain where he thought, I need a place where I can do this, where I can have the time and nobody's going to bother me to really get this done. So when he constructed the murder castle, he made an area in the basement that only he could go into, that he could be alone and not have any interruptions. And he had a nice big coal-fired furnace that was big enough to fit a body in, in pieces, and to burn the body. But the problem is, you have to get like up to, I think it's like 1,600 degrees, I believe it is, for like 2 hours to completely burn away a body. And you're just not going to do that with a wood or coal-fired furnace. It's just not going to happen. So he couldn't get it hot enough to where it would completely turn into ash. So he would end up with these bits of bone, charred bone and stuff that he had to try to figure out a way to get rid of. And in the show, they went to a place where he owned a property, and they took one of those cadaver dogs that can smell human remains, took it all around the property, and it hit on an area where the dog thought that it was human remains. So they dug there. They brought in a team, and they really slowly and carefully dug there. And what they found at first was pieces of coal that were burnt in a furnace, little pieces of coal. And that was interesting because H.H. Holmes had a coal furnace that he used to dispose of body parts in, but then he would have to dump the body parts somewhere. And then they found buttons, like several buttons that were the same style. So it looked like it came from the same dress or coat or whatever, which was interesting. Then they found a bunch of pieces of bone that were charred up. Now, they said, the person that looked at the bones said that they thought it was animal bones, not human bones. But I don't think it was ever definitively proven one way or the other what kind of bone it was. But there were pieces of coal and there were charred buttons that were found buried there. And during his time, that area was woods. It wasn't like a residential area. So there really wasn't anybody out there doing much of anything. You know, so that was a spot where he would take and go and dump remains out of his stove and kind of bury them, cover them over with some dirt and stuff to try to hide what he was doing. Another thing he was doing was he owned a cement factory right on the river. And they think that he may have put some body parts and stuff into blocks of cement and sunk them down into the river. And when they did a sweep of the river, they did find what looked like pieces of cement and stuff in the river. They never did figure out whether or not there was anything. See, the show was kind of like, there was a bunch of stuff in it that there was really good, interesting evidence. And then they would go and go and go, and then there wasn't a whole lot of definitive, absolute proof in the show. But there was enough circumstantial evidence and stuff that kind of lined up that made you say, yeah, this is getting to the point, like one or two things, you might say, well, that could be a coincidence. But when every single thing lines up like that over and over and over again, all these different points, then you start to go, hey, wait, there's something here. You know what I mean? And so it goes on, and then they start examining this theory that H.H. Holmes escaped his own execution, and they buried somebody else instead. This was based on basically no more than a conspiracy theory that people were talking about, and they wanted to see if it was true. Turns out that H.H. Holmes was paid the equivalent in today's money of like $250,000 to write out his confessions for some magazine or newspaper or something like that. I forget exactly the publication, but it was some publication that paid him a butt ton of money. It was like $6,000 or $7,000 they paid him, which in today's money is like $250,000. So he had plenty of cash while he was in jail. And what people are thinking is that he paid off the guards to let him go instead of execute him, and they buried somebody else in his place. Maybe even executed somebody else in his place. I don't know. But that's the theory. So to do that, they found where he was buried, and they actually dug it up. And what's crazy is they had to go like through the court and get a court order so that they could exhume the body. All the red tape you got to go through. But when they first dug down, they just found like an empty box. And it was like, oh, he's not there. This is crazy, right? But then underneath the box was concrete, which didn't make a lot of sense. And Holmes said that he wanted to be buried in concrete, buried deep and buried in concrete. That was his final wish. So they did that. So they went through the concrete, and they found underneath that layer of concrete, there was a concrete block. And they dug into that, and that's where they found the bones. It was like 10 feet down, though. It was really far. And they took the bones off, and they cleaned them up, took them to a lab, and they got a sample from the bones. And the guy who was trying to prove that H.H. Holmes was Jack the Ripper in the show is the great-great-grandson of H.H. Holmes. So they did a DNA test with him and with the bones that were in the grave, and they proved that it was indeed H.H. Holmes in that grave. Right? Those were his bones. So he did not escape his execution. He was executed and buried exactly where he had planned to be buried. So it was a very interesting series to watch. And as somebody who has studied the case, and we did a show on it before, and I kind of held that same opinion that I thought that H.H. Holmes was Jack the Ripper, because it all kind of lines up. He was there during the time. The murders match the murders he did here, as far as how he did them. He took organs just like he took organs here. One of his favorite things to do here was sell the organs and skeletons and stuff to medical schools, and he was most likely doing that over there to make some extra money. Another thing is he had a picture of one of the murder victims. This is an interesting bit too. In his possessions, there was a box. And this box contained like little keepsakes and stuff like that, and a bunch of photographs. And one of the photographs that the box contained was of a lady that was one of the victims of Jack the Ripper. It was an earlier picture of her, okay, when she was still alive. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense why H.H. Holmes would have an earlier picture of this woman that was killed by Jack the Ripper over in London. You know, how the hell would he even get something like that? I mean, it's not like today when you could go on the internet, find a picture, and take it to Walmart and print it out. You know what I mean? He would have had to physically go get it if he would have had it. So that is a definite link between H.H. Holmes and Jack the Ripper, is that he has a photograph of one of the victims in his possession, which, you know, along with the manifest that have him on it, the bill of sales that have him on it, and there's a audio recording that was done that was supposedly H.H. Holmes confessing to a whole bunch of murders, which was interesting too. He didn't confess to the Jack the Ripper murders on that audio recording, but he confessed to a hell of a lot of murders. But we don't know for sure if that was actually him or not. But it was interesting. They didn't even play it, which sucked, because they said it was too fragile, but they had a transcript of it. And anytime you just have a transcript of something and you don't get to hear the actual thing itself, I don't know. That always raises a red flag for me, you know. I'm the kind of guy, I want to see the evidence for myself. I want to hear it for myself. You know, but overall, it was a really interesting series. And there was extra evidence in the series that wasn't there during my research. Obviously, because it's stuff that they had found that didn't exist. Well, it existed, but it wasn't known at the time that I did the show. At the time I did the show, I already believed that H.H. Holmes was Jack the Ripper. Now, the interesting thing is I didn't believe that before the show. Right? Like, when I first had the idea to do the show, I thought, this is kind of interesting. H.H. Holmes and Jack the Ripper, kind of similar with the way they killed people. You know? That might be a good angle for a show. You know, was H.H. Holmes Jack the Ripper? So I had the idea, so I started doing research to see if, you know, it could even be a show, if there was anything to it. And by the end of that research, I was like, man, I think H.H. Holmes was Jack the Ripper. You know, so we did the episode, and I presented a bunch of evidence on the episode and went through what I had found, and that was my opinion, was that I believed that he was. And it's interesting now that I watched this show on, I believe it was History Channel, but I think I watched it on Hulu, that I watched the show, and it's like a bunch of new evidence that wasn't there before. You know, that's, to me, it's just too many things. You know, too many coincidences for it not to be so. If he was here instead of there, if it couldn't be proven that he was in London, or if it could be proven that he was here during the murders then, no big deal. Then he wasn't. But the evidence shows the opposite, And what's interesting is there's another thing called the curse of H.H. Holmes that they talk about. And that's where the conspiracy theory that he survived the execution came from. Because they say that everybody who was involved in the case ended up dying really horrible ways after his execution. So they think it was either the ghost of H.H. Holmes taking people out, which is nonsense, or they thought that maybe he bribed his way out of the execution and kind of conned everybody and got out of there. But that's why the exhuming of the grave was done, to prove once and for all whether he was in there or not. And it turns out he was. So he did not survive the execution. He was executed for his crimes, and he was buried. As far as why those people ended up all murdered, who knows? Could have been somebody that admired H.H. Holmes. Somebody, because there's people out there that get into serial killers and they idolize them for some reason. Could have been that. Or when Old Boy gets on here, he'll talk about this because he knows more about it than I do. But he said that there's a group of people Ted Bundy actually spoke about this, according to Old Boy. That there was a group of people that have been doing this for thousands of years. They go around and they kill all these people and everything, and kind of all work together. It's like I guess a serial killer club or something. I don't know. He'll explain it better than I can because I don't really understand it yet because I don't know what he's talking about. But that could be a possibility too. Maybe they went and punished the people that punished H.H. Holmes because he was part of their number or something. Could be. I don't know. But I thought this would make an interesting show. I thought it would be interesting to talk about. And the evidence to me is kind of a vindication of that show that I did like 7 years ago. Because I know in the comment section of that show, there was some people that were like, you're out of your effing mind, dude. There's no way that this is true. There's no way that H.H. Holmes was Jack the Ripper. And it's always funny when those people say things like that because it's like, did you even watch the show or you just see the title and decided to comment, Because if you would have watched the show, you'd have seen I went through all the evidence and showed you exactly why I believed what I believed. Now you can dispute the evidence. You can say, well, even though that evidence is there, I still don't believe it. That's fine. But to act like, oh my God, it's such a crazy idea, doesn't make any sense to me. Because if you're a logical person, then you just follow the evidence, wherever the evidence goes. That's how I do everything. I'm not going to say I don't come into things with preconceived notions, because I do. Like, I'm a human being. That's just the way it goes. You feel a certain way about things when you start looking into them. But I never let what I think going in influence what I find. I just follow the evidence when I find it. I look into it, I research, and one thing leads to another, and then you research this thing, which leads to this thing, and you research that thing, and by the end of it, you have a pretty good awareness and knowledge of the subject matter, and you can come to a pretty educated conclusion on what you think might have happened, And to me, there's way more evidence that shows that H.H. Holmes was indeed Jack the Ripper than there is evidence that shows that he wasn't. Because I'm not really aware of any evidence that shows that he wasn't. Now, there's theories on it. There's people that say it, that, it can't be because of this, or this. But as far as actual definitive evidence that you can hold in your hand and say, look at this. This is what it is. Look at this manifest. This proves that he was here instead of there. Look at this. Look at that. They don't ever have any of that stuff. It's always just, oh no, you're stupid. But you're going to have that. But it was my opinion then. And it is even more so my opinion now. That I truly believe that H.H. Holmes was Jack the Ripper. And that's kind of a good thing in a way if you think about it. Because that means that Jack the Ripper ended up paying for his crimes. He may not have been convicted of those murders over there in England, but it's all the same thing. He got convicted of a bunch here, and he ended up executed for murder, which is what would have happened if he'd have been caught there, I'm sure. Although, yeah, I imagine back then probably England did do the death penalty. So he probably would have been put to death there as well. So it all kind of worked out in the end, that he did get punished for it. But that's my opinion. I'm going to throw over to Old Boy and see what he thinks about it. I don't think he probably shares my opinion. He probably has a different opinion. But also, while he's on here, I want him to talk about that murder club thing he was talking to me about a little bit more, and kind of let you guys know exactly what he's talking about, because I believe I probably butchered it when I was trying to explain it, because I'm not as familiar as he is with all of that. So that being said, I'm going to throw over to Old Boy and see what he has to say. Go ahead, brother.
Thank you, brother. I don't agree with that, and I'm going to tell you why. It's already been proven, in fact, there was more than one killer. And now, do I believe that H.H. Holmes and Jack the Ripper knew each other? Yes. The problem was there was a victim, and this is disputed. There was a victim that said they saw two people. They didn't die. They got away. I don't know what I believe on H.H. Holmes. There's so many stories, because this documentary he's talking about, there's somebody already, I was telling him earlier, I read it, and I was reading it to him, there's somebody disputing it already. Because he's right. There's a possibility that he paid himself, he had a lot of money. I think he was rich. That's one thing I will agree with him, is I think H.H. Holmes had a lot of money, and back then people would do shit like that. Might have paid himself or buried the body. Or, here's another thing I think it might have happened. That the body was worth money, and people wanted to see why he was a killer back then, and took the body and then put somebody else's body in there. That's another possibility people are not thinking about. Or there is a group of killers, serial killers, that Ted Bundy claimed, and this was off a documentary, that Ted Bundy claimed that he wasn't the only killer. There was a group of people going around killing, and they've been around for hundreds of years. And there's these killers called the smiley face killers. There was these killings that would happen, and they would carve a smiley face. But there was also the smiley face killer that was Keith Jasperson. But there was arguments that proved that he wasn't the only person. He wasn't the person did it, because he would leave like a smiley face, like with a letter or something. But this person, it would be in different parts of the country. It wasn't just in the same country, and it was at the same time they found bodies. So that's another argument. Was there killers in the 90s? Ted Bundy said there was a group of killers. I've heard this rumor numerous times. I don't know if there's truth. It's controversial. But if you think about it, why wouldn't there? Why wouldn't there be people like that would meet together and have a clique of people that kill people? And they all, I mean, think about it. If you believe it, you believe that the Illuminati, and you believe it, there's people who do horrible things. What if these are just the people that were killers at one time, and then they made the Illuminati? I'm saying a theory of like all these groups, and they've just been around for maybe 500 to 600, 700 years, maybe more. I don't know. I'm just giving an estimate. And this is just something that's been going on for a while. And now they made like certain groups. That's why this stuff happens. And some groups are different than others. There was a movie, and it's very controversial. It was made in the 70s, called Salo. I'm not going to say the name. Well, I can. I think it was 120 Days of Sodomy. Sodomy. That's what the real name, because it was made in Italy. It was about, I think it was in Germany when the Germans took over Italy at the time. Yeah, it was about people, a small group of people that ran everything in the world, and they did everything they wanted. And in this movie, they did everything horrible you can think of. And they killed people, they murdered, they did whatever they wanted. Raped, killed, perverted crap, did circle of blood, circle of feces, because I don't want to say the other word, and they did certain shit. And one shocking thing after another. And what happened is in Italy, back then they didn't have the laws that they have now. So some of these actors were treated like shit, and some things really did happen. The director wanted it so shocking that one of the people killed him because he lost his mind after doing the show and the movie, and killed him and killed the director. That's how fucked up this movie was in the 70s, but it portrayed what I do believe. There's a reason that movie was made, to prove a point to how horrible people are. There is a group of people, and I don't, that's why I don't like talking about this, that I believe do this shit. I believe H.H. Holmes was that person. I believe Jack the Ripper and them were both two different people, but I also believe they knew each other, and I believe that that's why that explains the picture. I think H.H. Holmes had a fascination with Jack the Ripper. I think they met each other, and I think they did stuff together. And I think it was more of a killing spree that would go on, who could outdo each other. That's my opinion. Now, there was the Elliot Ness killer, the butcher that people, Elliot Ness that took out Al Capone. There was a case that he ended up retiring because this guy was a killer that would send him shit all the time. It was some kind of axe killer, but we could never find out. And this led to Elliot Ness, who was one of the greatest, cops, detectives of all time, to retire. I watched it on, what was that? Unsolved Mysteries. Back in the day. I believe that it's not impossible that they could have been the same person, though, either. I'm not saying that's impossible, because there's evidence that, like James said, that there's a possibility he could have been. And he could have got away with it. Just like I think Billy the Kid was not killed by Pat Garrett. I think Pat Garrett let him go. And in the I think it was the 40s, a guy came out and said he was Billy the Gun, and what he was saying was accurate to what he proved and showed pictures, and then he died before he could prove it. If you've seen Blaze's Glory, it talks about that, because there's a guy who really did come where they are making a Young Guns 3 where Billy the Kid survives and goes out another way. That's coming. And it's going to have Emilio Estevez, so I'm just throwing it in there. But I'm just showing you, it doesn't have nothing, but it does, because I don't think they killed H.H. Holmes. I think he went to Chicago and became that butcher too. And he kept laughing because he got away with it and changed his name. I think that that's a possibility too. But there's things saying that there was more than one person in the House of Horrors. I think he had people working for him, and I think he had a connection. That's why he has money. I'm going to tell you another theory that's going to blow you guys' mind. I think a lot of these killings are people that work for certain people. And these certain people are not like me and you. I've had friends tell me, and I don't want to say these people that met certain people, that they were not human-like. And I believe that that's why we have some of the shit that goes on. And that's me, and people can think I'm crazy. I don't give a fuck what you think, because I've said a lot of shit and proven it. I play the dead. Some people don't believe it, and then they come crying to me and asking me to help them. That's what's funny about that. But that's just saying another example of why I don't give a fuck what people think. I believe that some of these killers are so bloodthirsty that they click together with certain people. Why wouldn't you? You want to keep each other safe. You want to be like a gang. Why wouldn't there be a gang of murderers? There already is. I mean, people do things, cartels and stuff. I'm just saying that they do shit, and so do gangs, but there's reasons to it. They don't just go murdering people for no reason. These people just kill people for no reason. Ted Bundy was a women loved him. He was not an ugly guy. He was a handsome killer. But I don't think he was lying about what he was saying, because he wasn't the only one who ever said that. Charles Manson said there's a group of people who were like that. That lady I forget what her name. Remember the woman serial killer? I don't know what her name is. They're gonna do I think that's gonna be the 4th movie coming out.
Eileen Wuornos.
Yes. She claimed there was a group of people like that, and they knew what she was doing, and the cops knew what she was doing. I believe that there's a group of people, and they're still around, that do this shit. That's why I'm not really want to talk about it, because they might watch her show because they're connected. I believe this. I believe there's different circles everywhere, and they all do perverted, fucked up, weirdo shit. And there's different circles of these people, but there's reasons for it. That gets into the supernatural and the vampire shit. I think vampires are real, guys, and I think they're different than what you think. But there's people who go in around killing, and I think they work with these groups. I don't think they're going and protecting them or nothing. I just think there's like in Serbia. If you ever see the Serbian films, guys, that was about how stuff in Serbia goes on. All this perverted, snuff shit that goes on, and there's a connection of people, and they found that. That's true. I don't know if you read the lady in Thailand. Some guy in America was involved in it. He moved there, and he did horrible fucking shit to kids and babies, and it's disgusting. I don't want to go into it, but he killed them and did stuff. I think there's connections of people like the Red Rooms and shit like that watch this shit. And I think there's people who run around the Zodiac killer. They think it was you remember, was the Unabomber, people think, and they're arguing that now. But the Zodiac killer, if you think about it, the Zodiac killer, think about that. It was a ritual killing. The smiley face killers, ritual killings. Ted Bundy, they couldn't prove everything he did. He did killings, and I think he was a killer, but he talked about rituals and people who were doing rituals. And I know Ted Bundy was a liar, but I don't think he was lying about this. He said he killed people, but he said he wasn't the only one. And if you think about it, one couple of the killings, he was in jail for, when it was copycat they thought was doing it. I'm very interested in killing. My wife is a big fan of them. Not that she likes what they do, but it's just, women, for some reason, they love serial killers, and that's a proven fact. They just like it. They have a fascination, and that's why they keep making these shows. The Ed Gein one, it's totally not true. They're already saying that 70% of it's not real, 75. Just like Jeffrey Dahmer, they made him a nice guy. He was no fucking nice guy. Not at all. And his dad, they exaggerated that too. His dad knew what he did, but he defended him because they didn't want his name to be to glorify him, and that's what they did in Netflix, and that's why the family sued Netflix over that shit. They made him look like, oh, well, he had all these issues. If you ever watched it, he said he knew what he was doing. At least he did, and he said that's why. You know what was crazy about Jeffrey Dahmer? I think I'm going to tell you what I think about Dahmer. I think he was a sick fucking person. But I think Jeffrey Dahmer really did regret doing some of the stuff he did. Because there's that guy said it. He's talked to him. And he admitted he was wrong. But he also said John Wayne Gacy's a fucking liar. Because he said, oh, I ain't like that. Oh, I don't like. Jeffrey Dahmer said straight out, he knows what he was fucking doing. John Wayne Gacy was a fucking liar. He was. He lied about being all these. You know what? He had a little bit of power, I guess, with like the community, and he would brag about himself all the time. And John Wayne Gacy was a bullshitter, but he was a killer. That's why Jeffrey Dahmer used to laugh at him, because he talked about him. And I believe it. What's his name? Richard Ramirez. He asked him, do you believe in evil? Because he was a Satanist. He believes, I believe evil exists, and I believe everybody's capable of evil. I am evil, not 100%, because it's impossible to be 100% anything. But he was about 98%, maybe 2 or 3%, but he was there. He was, and we're talking about murder, so we're going to go in. We're not getting off the topic, that's why. But I'm showing all this. I believe they're all connected, and it started even before H.H. Holmes. It started with Elizabeth Bathory. I believe she was involved in it. I believe that if you look at her killings, I believe that I think that they pinned it on her, but I don't think she did it all. I think that she was a part of it. And that's how far it goes back. I think, who else was back then? That family had 8 people. The Dahmer family, or what was it? The Dahmer family. I believe they were.
Are you talking about the Bean Clan?
Yeah, the Bean Clan. Yeah, the Bean Clan. Yeah. And I believe they were connected with that. I believe they did things differently. I think the Texas Chainsaw Massacre has a lot of truth to it. If you ever seen, I know it's a horrible movie. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the new generation. It had Leatherface as a transgender woman. It had Matthew McConaughey, and it had, what's her name, the one that got her surgery done. She was in Dumb and Dumber. Not Dumb and Dumber. Me and myself and Irene. She had that. She looked like she sucked a lemon, but she went and got surgery to quit, because people would quit making fun of her. But what happened in that is this guy came out of nowhere, and he came in a limo, and they were working for this guy, a billionaire, and I believe some of that. I believe Hollywood tells a story on stuff that they don't want to tell you, but it's real. I believe it's all connected. I believe that H.H. Holmes and Jack the Ripper were a different person, but I believe they knew each other. I believe they had some kind of weird fucking sick contest of who could kill each other, who could do the worst killings. And I also think they met each other. But there is also a possibility it could have been Jack the Ripper, and he went to fucking America, and he still kept killing, and he was H.H. Holmes, and they killed him. But he had so much fucking money that he knew somebody, and they got him out. Back then, you could have done that. That's a possibility. I'm not going to sit here and say he's wrong, because there's evidence on that. I want people to understand this is a theory, but I've listened to shit, and if you think about it, it's true. Why wouldn't there be a circuit of serial killers? There's a circuit of everything else: drugs, murderers, killings, hitman. The dark web talks about it. I don't really like talking about it, but there's dark web saying that there's people who do this shit. There's some weird shit that goes on. I think there's an underbelly that we're all uncomfortable with, that realize that we may not be the only things here, and we work for certain things certain bad people do for perks. You got to look at it. If you're H.H. Holmes and somebody goes, I'll give you $10 million. You're going to take it. Back then, it was a whole different world. And especially you like killing. Well, you can do whatever you want. Here's the money to do whatever you want, because you would have needed the money for all that. To go to Europe and do all this shit and make a house of horrors, and had more than just him doing it. I don't believe he was by himself. He might have been a Jack the Ripper, but there is proof that there was more than one person. I believe he maybe had a wife or a girlfriend that went along. Maybe he was gay. We don't know. That he had somebody with him. But I believe he had a friend. If you ever read Frankenstein, you know that there's truth to that. That there was somebody that brought a hand and a dog back to life. And it was around that time. Do you want me to think what I think? They were connected. How do you think they got the body parts illegally? You pay a serial killer, I don't care where you get the body parts, just give me it. I'll give you $10,000. Back then it was probably not. It was about, hey, you get me a heart, I'll give you fucking 1,000 shillings there. I don't know what they're in London. You know what I'm talking about. But if you think about it, that could be a possibility. And 1,000 shillings, it's like probably $30,000 now. That was a lot of money there. That feeds your family for a long time, 5-6 years, maybe 10 if you saved it. You're going to do it. I don't give a fuck what people think. If you're starving, you're dead. I'll go dig up a body. I wouldn't kill anybody. That's ridiculous. That's not me. But back then, if somebody's already passed away, I'll go dig a body. If they were going to give me a 500 shillings, that's going to feed me for 4 years. Yeah, I'd do it. That was a different world and a different time. You also got to realize you got caught grave robbing, you got grave robbing, you went to jail or you got hung. That's the consequences. You roll the dice, you take what you get. I believe that there's a circuit of killers, and they've been around for I don't want to say thousands of years, maybe 1,000 years, or less, maybe more. But I know they've been here before America was made. I think they've been around for a while. I think that some people who were in war, and this is my opinion, never really got over it, because those are brutal wars. You think about it. If you went and fought in the 1200s, 1300s, even before that, the Viking era, you killed people in fucked up ways. You think it just goes away? People who go to war, look what happens now. They fucking lose it because they don't get the right help. But now they're starting to figure out PTSD and stuff like that. But then you didn't have that. You just kept killing. Once you kill 20, 30 people, you don't give a fuck anymore, man. It doesn't go away like that. And that's not like you did it. But when you're fighting wars like Braveheart, the Revolution War, you're killing people. And it's going to take a toll on you. There's some people who like it, though. There's some people who absolutely have no problem doing it. There was a soldier that was in I think, World War II. The guy was talking about it. He loved killing people. He actually took a picture of him with that did the ears. That shit was true. There was really people doing that. They would put ears of their people they killed in the Vietnam War, Korean War, World War II. They lost it. I believe that once you start killing, Rambo made it very clear if you look at it. It ended for you, not me. And you know what? There was a lot of truth to that. What do we do to people in war? We fucking don't take care of them. Sorry, and James will agree with me, we don't. They go crazy and they do shit this is what happens. Now, I don't think everybody was. Jeffrey Dahmer sure in hell was no guy was in the military. He just liked to kill. I don't think Jeffrey Dahmer had anything to do with these people. I think Jeffrey Dahmer didn't meet anybody. I think that they stayed away from him. I think there's people who didn't like him, and I think he did his own thing. And I think, but he even somebody did you ever have anybody help you? And he said no on that, but he said that people knew what he was doing and didn't say nothing. So maybe he didn't know them, but he heard about him, because there was another killer, wasn't there, around that time that was going around, and there was, when he was in jail, it was killing people. I don't know. It was the Milwaukee Slayer. Somebody else. There was somebody else there around there too, and they think that he might have met him one time on one of those bars he was hanging out. But that's, like I said, rumor. Ed Gein was a different story. Ed Gein was just a fucking weirdo that his mom did weird shit to him, and he lost it and took it out on women, and he tried to make a woman suit, and that's where they got Buffalo Bill from. He put the lotion on, but Silence of the Lambs has a lot of truth to that. It is based on certain killers. If you ever watched them, I don't know if you ever seen. I know James is a big horror fan. Have you ever seen the movie Manhunter? It's about Hannibal Lecter in the 80s. See that's the first movie of the Silence of the Lambs. It actually is Hannibal Lecter, and they have this killer. It's like 6'10" or something like that, or 7 foot. And he goes around, he puts like a thing, and he kills people in like fucked up ways. Like he tied up one guy in a chair, and he threw him into like some kind of like knife where he killed him. He kept ramming him, and it was just fucked up ways he was killing people. But watch that movie; it's actually good because it was in the 80s, and it's a very underrated movie. But that's the real start of the Silence of the Lambs, not Silence of the Lambs. It was about Hannibal Lecter was telling them about this killer. And then they made Silence of the Lambs, and they made Hannibal and Hannibal Rising and all the shows. I believe Hannibal was a real killer. Not him, but they portrayed him. I forget which killer it was, but I know they portrayed him from one of the killers. Hannibal Lecter was a brilliant person. He just went crazy. He didn't care. And he started eating human flesh, and he thinks it's good. A lot of cannibals say that human flesh is delicious if you cook it right. There's actually the cannibal cooking book online, but they got rid of it because people found it. There's people out there who do things not just because they can, but there's reasons. Who can I outdo? Why am I doing this? Well, there's killers, okay, but there's only I'm going to tell you, there's a one. What is it? A murderer, a serial killer is what, 1 out of 1,000,000 or something like that, or 1 out of 500,000. So you don't think there's a group of people that talk, well, what do you do that brag? Some of these people like to brag. Charles Manson was a bragger. Ted Bundy was a bragger. Jeffrey Dahmer was a bragger. Who else was there? Richard Ramirez was just a fucking weirdo. There's they remember the one that would lock up. I think he was in like Utah or Arizona, and he bought those you know what they like on a ship, they have those containers. He would lock people up and torture them there, and they found a whole bunch of bodies in there. I forget what he was. That's what the if you guys ever seen Wolf Creek 2, and there's 2 of them. The guy in Australia, that was really true. There really was a serial killer in Australia that would do shit like that. And he just lost it. There's some people, there's families have done it. Like you said, there was a cannibal family that used to eat people. The Dahmer family used to be in the 1800s. They did the same shit. I believe they're all connected in some way. Now, there's going to be arguments. Oh, they didn't get. No, they knew each other. I'm not talking about Jeffrey Dahmer. I think there's some that just did their own thing, but they all knew each other. They all knew something. Some of them stayed away because they just wanted to do their own, and they got their own fantasies or whatever weirdo shit they got out of it. But I believe it. My real dad, so people understand, he's gone, and I don't care, and he deserves to be dead. He was. I think he did some shit. I can't prove it. He was a very horrible person. I think he went to jail 80, 90 times. Did shit to women. They think he murdered his ex-girlfriend. He threw her down the stairs, but they couldn't prove it. There was no proof. And she was drinking. She hit her head and bled to death for 2 days. But yet he said he wasn't there and he didn't see it or didn't see what happened. He left. There was no proof. He also assaulted women. He assaulted people all the time. He wasn't a good person. My grandfather went to war and he did horrible shit. That's why I don't. But I know I could have. But I don't hate people like that. If I would have grew up in another way, like I had a fucked up life, and I ain't gonna lie, guys, I didn't have the best life. Money isn't everything, and trust me on this. But I didn't have a horrible life where like my parents beat me all the time. I didn't eat shit like that, and I got picked on really bad. And that's probably why I didn't, because I know how it is to be weak, to be the weak person. And that's probably what saved me from doing things. And I'm not saying I ever thought about it, but I think that's probably some of it. And I'm not stupid. I didn't go that way. Yeah, I think that's because of my mother. My mother doesn't have that in her. But there's a craziness to me that I leave it alone. And that's why I write books and I do it another way. I think everybody has that. I think James has a little bit of that. He could be something, but he chose not to. And that's a good thing. I'm not saying we advocating it. And I believe people can be something else, especially if you have certain stuff that it's in your blood altogether. I stay away from it. I stay away from that part of me. And I'm glad I did. There's a bad in everyone, I believe. I think people can control it and some people can't. That's why I think some people should never be in relationships, because I don't think they're ever going to realize that they're not going to ever see that person as a equal. They're always going to think them as weak. And that's why we have a lot of issues in relationships altogether. I'm not saying men or women, I'm saying altogether. Some people like to control people and torture people and get a like out of it. And that's why we have the issues we have with murders and killings. I believe Jeffrey Dahmer enjoyed killing people. I believe H.H. Holmes really enjoyed killing people to the point where he could have been Jack the Ripper and he just couldn't get enough. And he was just, just an evil fucking person, man. I'm sorry you can kill that many people. You have no soul. And there's people like that. And I bet you he probably was in a war. And he just never quit killing. And I hope you guys, when you watch the show, that you understand that this was something we wanted to do. And I'm glad we did it, because I'm like, we can make a good show out of it. I do not believe they were the same person, but I'm not going to say it's not impossible. But James makes some good points. I do think more than I used to that there is a possibility now. I believe it was I think more of I can outdo you, I'm better than you. I think that happens a lot. Well, you're going to kill that woman, I'm going to go kill 2 women. Well, I'll kill 3 in the next 2 days. One movie you guys need to see, if you know who Matt Damon is, see The House That Jack Built. Because Uma Thurman's in it, but Matt Dillon explains what a fucking serial killer really, what he thinks, and he's so slick that a girl went and talked to the cops, and he still convinced the cops that she was just mad at him and drunk and had too much drink, and he took her up and killed her 10 minutes after talking to the cops. And if you guys can see that movie, James, it's called in the unrated version, The House Jack Built, and he's the murderer. But he's so smart, but he's such a, what do they call it? He would get in his mind after he kills somebody, he had to clean up. Oh well, I left the spot, so he'd go and clean it up again. He was such a what's that thing where you have to have it perfect?
Obsessive compulsive.
Yes, obsessive compulsive. Neat freak. So he went back 5 times to clean up the murder, and it took him all day. Then he's all, I forgot the body. He went back and got it. He just lost his mind, but he was so smart, the cops pulled him over, and he got out of it. Watch the show. It's crazy. Watch Ed Gein, even though there's somewhat bullshit. The guy played Ed Gein pretty fucking well. I've watched some of it. I've watched all of it. But I've watched him, and he plays it pretty fucking well. I think it's the guy who played in Dumb and Dumber as a young Jim Carrey back in the early 2000s. I think that's who it is. He looks like him.
Oh boy, it's Jax from Sons of Anarchy.
Oh, is it Jax?
Yeah.
Oh wow, he did a good job, man. I didn't know it was. I thought it was the other, because the other guy kind of looks like him. But okay, it was Jack. Damn, dude, I didn't know it was him. I didn't pay attention, but fuck, that's crazy. Wow, he did a good fucking job, man. The movie's crazy, and then the Gacy movie. I haven't seen the Gacy show. I want to watch that. John Wayne Gacy was a different person. But my opinion is, I believe there's groups of people been around for hundreds of years, maybe thousands, that have been killing forever. And I think that it's not accident. I think there's rogue people who do their own shit. Charles Manson was one of them. Charles talked about people like that. And I believe that Charles Manson wasn't lying, guys. I think Charles Manson pretended to be... He knew he was gunned. He's never going to get out. And he carved his... But I think Charles Manson played a part, and people fell for it. He was smarter than what people think. Look how much fucking money he made, like $10 million or something in jail. He was fucking smart. He wasn't stupid. Controlled people and got people to kill for him. And he knows that because he talked to Sharon Tate. We've never talked about that. That he's talked to Sharon Tate at that house with somebody, David Owens, at one time. He actually had a conversation with the late Sharon Tate. And that it's about him. We're talking about serial killing. That's weird. We brought that up. We've never really talked about that before. You've actually had a conversation with Sharon Tate, the late Sharon Tate. And after I get off, maybe he could talk about it for a second, because we got a couple more minutes. But that being said, that's just my opinion, guys.
Yeah, it was supposedly the ghost of Sharon Tate. Whether, I have a problem with that, because I don't believe that ghosts are human spirits, because the Bible is very, very clear about it. I don't think they're all demons like a lot of people do, but the Bible says there's all kinds of different unclean spirits. So, that's that. But the problem I have with it being a one-upsmanship between H.H. Holmes and Jack the Ripper, like Old Boy was talking about, like, trying to one-up each other, is when H.H. Holmes left England, the Jack the Ripper murders stopped. And if you look at the progression of the Jack the Ripper murders, they were getting more and more violent, more and more out of control. The last one, like I said earlier, was absolutely horrific. I mean, he laid her completely open and took like the kidneys and the uterus and everything. So when you have that kind of progression of violence and that kind of progression of rage, that person doesn't just stop. So if Jack the Ripper was still in London, there would still be murders after that. That person's not going to stop unless they're dead, or they leave. And if it was H.H. Holmes, you see that he didn't stop. He ramped it way up, way up. It got worse and worse and worse. And it got to an industrial scale. We're talking, he got, people think he did like 25, 30 murders, but in reality, it's hundreds and hundreds of murders, most likely. Because you got to remember, during that time period when the murder castle was in full operation and he had the cement plant going and everything, during that time was when they were having the Chicago World's Fair. And there were literally hundreds of people that went missing, that they have no idea where they went. People that came in from other areas for the fair and were just never heard from again. So I think that was a very busy, busy time for H.H. Holmes, and he was just killing as much as he could kill. And that's probably what ended up being his downfall, is that he got sloppy because he just had way too many and he couldn't keep it all straight. You got to realize back then trying to get rid of a body was hard because you couldn't, he tried to burn the bodies up, but there wasn't a whole lot you could do because you couldn't get it hot enough to get rid of them completely, and the thing that kept him going for so long, I think, is the fact that they didn't have forensics the way they have today. So basically back then, police work, you're just kind of going by witness descriptions, by witness accounts. Because you don't have fingerprints back then. You don't have blood type back then. You don't have DNA sequencing back then. You don't have any of the forensic stuff that you have now. So basically, if the cop doesn't see you do it, you get away. Unless they have somebody that can say, hey, it was this guy that did it, then you're kind of in the clear, But I think that either H.H. Holmes was Jack the Ripper, and he left England, and that's why the murder stopped. Or the real Jack the Ripper, if it wasn't H.H. Holmes, ended up dead somehow. Either natural causes or unnatural causes. Somebody took him out. Because you just don't stop when you have that progression of violence. That is evidence of psychosis. That's evidence of mania. Getting worse and worse and worse and getting more ramped up. If anything, he would get more violent and sloppier. And that's what ends up making most of these serial killers get caught, is because they reach a point to where it's too much. The obsession is too much and they get sloppy. And half of them, or over half of them, probably, they kind of want to get caught by the end because they just can't stand what they're doing anymore. But they can't stop. And they know they can't stop. Dahmer was like that. Dahmer said he was glad he was locked up because he'll never stop. And this way, at least, everybody can be safe, and it keeps him from killing. So, as far as that goes, that's my thought on it, is that it couldn't have been a one-upsmanship kind of thing because the murder stopped, and that doesn't happen. And just to clarify about the conspiracy about H.H. Holmes escaping his execution, they did prove that was him in the grave. They did it with DNA from his great-great-grandson. So we do know that H.H. Holmes was executed for the crimes, and we do know that he was buried in that grave. Because when they exhumed the grave and dug him up, they did testing on the bones and got DNA, and they matched it with his great-great-grandson. So we know that at least that part of the story, we have definitive proof that he did in fact get executed. As far as the group of people going around killing and all that kind of stuff that old boy was talking about, I wouldn't doubt it. You know, I wouldn't doubt it. There's a lot of stuff that goes on that normal people don't know about. You know, you've got cannibal clubs out there where they are eating people. You've got sick elite people that literally do things like the Hunger Games and hunt other human beings and stuff like for real. You know, so it would not surprise me at all to learn that there's a group of people that goes around doing this. As far as most serial killers being part of that, I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is simply because of the psychiatric profile of a serial killer. Serial killers are usually loners. They're usually people that are kind of withdrawn and they don't get along with other people. You have exceptions. You have people like Manson and like Bundy who are very charismatic. But for the most part, they're usually kind of off, a little weird, and they kind of don't get along well with others. You know, they're kind of withdrawn and loners. The exception of that is people like a Manson or a Bundy, and they're more along the lines of a sociopath. Those are kind of people that don't have the conscience. They don't have that little voice inside them telling them, hey, you know, you're doing bad things here. You know, so that's my thought on that. But it wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, I'm sure there probably is. You know, and I'm sure that there's some that people think were murders, like serial killers and stuff like that were actually hits that were done. You know, people that said something they shouldn't have said or did something they shouldn't have did, and they got taken care of, you know, and it's covered up to look like a serial killer did it or something. I'm sure that's probably happened too, you know, but we have no proof of anything like that, and I honestly, I don't care to. You know what I mean? As far as I'm concerned, if there's a group of elites out there who are doing all this kind of stuff, who the hell am I to try to stop it? I can't do nothing about it, you know. I'm not trying to blow the whistle on anybody. I don't know, you know. But like I said, I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever. But I hope you guys enjoyed this one. It was fun for me because I always like it when an old show I did comes up years later and there's evidence proving some of the stuff I said or something like that. You know, I always think that's kind of cool. And the weird thing that I'll tell a lot of you guys that you probably don't know, we've done over 300 episodes of Staring. A lot, okay? And we've done some really amazing shows on some fascinating topics and got really deep in the weeds, a lot of information. And it's kind of funny because me and Old Boy talk outside of this. We're friends. And sometimes he'll bring up, hey, you remember when we did this show on this or whatever? And I'm like, oh, shit, we did do a show on that, didn't we? And I won't even remember that we did it, you know? And this is one of those shows that it was kind of like that for me. When me and my wife started watching the American Ripper show, I was like, hell, I did a show on that, didn't I? And I had to actually go back and check and see. But yes, I did actually do a show on it. And it happens like that a lot for me, to where we do so many shows and so many different topics and stuff that sometimes I don't remember. You know, Old Bill will say, hey, man, let's do a show on this. And I'll say, oh, yeah, we did that already. There was the one, Back Rooms is one he kept wanting to do. A show on back rooms over and over and over again. And like 4 or 5 times he said, hey man, let's do a show on back rooms. And 4 or 5 times I had to say, hey, we already did that show. It was back here, remember? So it kind of happens to him too, but that's kind of fun. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the show. I'm going to throw it back over to Old Boy, let him give his shout outs, and then we'll wrap up. Go ahead, brother.
I want to thank you guys. This is a good show. Yeah, we've done about 350 episodes. We've been here, just so you guys know. Sorry, I was eating something. Next year, not this year, it'll be 9 years since we did Staring in December. Christmas Day, or I think it was Christmas Day night, will be 9 years since we've been doing Staring in the Abyss. Next year will be 10 years. 10 fucking years. Guys, next year, a 10-year anniversary. Not a lot of people can say that. It's going to be 9 years next month. So 9 fucking years we've been doing this show. We've been on radio for almost 10. So all this experience that we weren't supposed to be doing, just so everybody knows, James is a horror writer, and I was doing not stupid because that's what made me. Facebook made me, guys, who I was. Old Boy is a known name. It is a known name. I made my name to something and people know who the fuck I am. And I'm not bragging, but I came from nothing. So did he. And he's known everywhere. Hershey's a name anyway, and he's related to them. But I'm so proud of what I've done and him that we weren't really doing this and we just got on as guests and we ended up becoming Staring into the Abyss and took it all over. It used to be Revolution Radio. And then I'm going to be honest, if we get more screwed, we're doing it still. We'll probably do it next week, but we're going to probably bring somebody in, an event that knows what they're doing, and go back to what it was supposed to be, kind of like Revolution Radio, but we'll talk about everything. That's coming. But thank you guys to listening on YouTube. Follow us on James Hershey's YouTube page. You can watch all the episodes for More Screwed, Staring at the Abyss, all kinds of side stuff James has done. You can get t-shirts at teespringstaringabyss.com. You can see us on Spotify. We're going to try to get on eventually on Apple. That's what I want to try to do. But you can watch the shows also on Facebook through YouTube. That being said, I want to thank you guys for listening to us. Almost 9 fucking years. Happy Halloween, but it's over. Next week is Veterans Day and Thanksgiving and then Christmas again. Shit. But I want to thank you guys. We love you and have a good night.
It's kind of crazy when you think about it, ain't it? That literally, we were on a show that was mostly politics, really, is what Revolution was. It was mostly talking politics and just being goofy and cutting up and having a good time with your friends, you know. It was a totally different thing than what we're doing now. And it got like a perfect storm kind of situation where everybody was kind of falling away that was doing it, you know, for different reasons. And it ended up being Christmas. And we had to do a show. And nobody was there but me and Old Boy. We were the only ones. And we were like, all right, what do you want to do? You know, Old Boy said, what do you want to do? I said, well, let's just do a show. You know, me and you can just do it, man. Let's just do one and we'll get it out. And then, you know, everybody will come back eventually and we'll get back to what we're doing. So staring wasn't even supposed to be a thing. Staring was supposed to be a one-time fill-in with me and Old Boy just talking about something, trying to fill the time because everybody else flaked out. And we both like paranormal stuff. We both like all this kind of stuff we talk about on Staring. So we decided, let's just talk about that. You know, instead of talking politics with just the two of us or you know, trying to put on a comedy show or whatever we wanted to do, let's just talk about what we love. Let's talk about Bigfoot and ghosts and goblins and demons and all that kind of stuff. You know, that's because we have that in common. We both enjoy that kind of stuff. So that's what we did. Literally no script, no idea what the hell we were going to talk about. We just went on to fill time to kind of save the network, and just did a show on Christmas talking about, I don't even remember what the hell the first show was, something about the occult or something like that. But we just went in and just talked, just kind of bullshitted through it, you know, not bullshitted because we know what we're talking about, but you know, just no script, no outline, no idea what we're going to talk about, just kind of winging it. And turned into damn near a decade in like 44 countries and on the radio and all over the damn place. Insane. Absolutely insane. At the time, I was just starting out as a horror author. You know, I hadn't even got a bestseller yet. You know, I was just starting. And, you know, just one of those things where I was doing an interview for my first book, I Am Legion, and I had a good time on the show. You know, and I have a good voice, they said, and people like to listen to me or whatever. So they say, hey, why don't you come on and do some more shows with us, you know, every once in a while. I was okay. And that's how it all started, you know, just coming in, hanging out. I wasn't in charge of anything. I was just a guest, you know, and just coming in, hanging out and bullshitting. And because we were willing to step up on Christmas and do the show, it turned into this. You know, and we took a hell of a ride, you know. We've kind of went all the way up and all the way down and all the way back up, and it's just crazy. You know, we've been around 9 years now, like you said, you know, well over 300 shows. And we've had shows that have gotten, you know, 1 million views. And we've got shows that get like 100 views. Who knows? It all depends. YouTube had a lot to do with that, but I've noticed that it's getting better on YouTube since they started letting everybody back on that they kicked off. Maybe they might have lifted our shadow ban or something, because I've noticed that people are watching more and we're getting more comments and stuff now than we used to. There was a long period of time where it would literally go from, I would put a show up and we'd get like 10,000 views within the first day. And I mean, it was crazy. And then by the end of it, it would be 100,000, 150,000, 250,000, whatever views for the show. It went from that to literally the next week, the next show we did, like 15 people, 15 views. You tell me how the hell that happens, where you go consistently from 10,000 the first day, and then you get 15 after a week or something. Something wasn't right. And it was right after we did some shows talking about some stuff that they didn't want us to talk about. And then all of a sudden, gone, But the funny thing is, like, we just kept going anyway. You know what I mean? We didn't give a shit because we enjoy what we're doing. We enjoy talking. And, we were here, we're on Spotify, we're on the radio. So it wasn't like YouTube, we weren't relying on YouTube for money or anything. You know what I mean? So for us, it was then, and it has always been just fun. Just getting on and doing these shows for you guys and talking about stuff we enjoy talking about and having a good time. And if you have a good time too, then subscribe to the channel, watch the videos, like them, comment, do whatever the hell you got to do to feed the algorithm beast, and we'll get out to more people. If you don't, and it's just me and old boy talking and nobody watching, that's fine too, because we're still going to hang out and talk because we're friends and we enjoy doing it, But if we never make any money from this, we don't care, And that's the same thing with the merch shop. Old boy always kind of plugs the merch shop. To let you guys know, we don't make any money off the merch shop because basically I charge what it costs me to make the stuff, right? I can get it made for X amount of dollars, and I just charge for you guys. I don't do the merch shop as like a way to make money. We don't make money off of it. We never make money off of it. It's simply because people were asking us for shirts and stuff. So I did the merch shop just so you guys could have merch if you wanted it. But, like, we don't make money off that stuff, Our money comes from other places. Old boy, he has a job. He does the 9-to-5 thing, I made money on my books, so I don't, this isn't like, that's why you don't see, when you're watching our shows, like a million ads, I do have ads on there because if you don't have ads, then they don't push it at all. Right? So you got to do some ads or they won't push your video. But what I try to do is just put them like every 15, 20 minutes instead of like every minute or two like everybody else does. Because I don't really care about the ads. I don't care about the revenue at all. For us, it's just fun. And so that's probably why we'll keep on doing staring for as long as we want. And I wouldn't be surprised if we make 15 years, 20 years. Who knows? We might die. Who knows? We're old. But, we'll keep doing it as long as we want. What surprises me and amazes me about it is that we do a show every week for 9 years. How the hell are we still talking about things? How do we still have things to talk about after 9 years? That's insane to me, that we can come on here and still do interesting, fun shows and have a good time and never have that moment where we're like, what do you want to talk about? I don't know. What do you want to talk about? Because we just have no idea, It seems like there's always something to talk about, which is really cool. And as long as there's still always something to talk about, we'll come on and talk about it. So, with that being said, if you guys have anything you want us to talk about, any subject matter that you'd like to see covered on Staring that we haven't done a show on already, then feel free to leave it in the comment section and we'll do a show about it. Because we're always down to talk about whatever. And I love researching things. So, even if it's something I don't know anything about it, I'll get on it and start researching it and learn about it, and then we'll do a fun show. So, hope you guys enjoyed it. Love you guys. Appreciate you guys. As always, it's up to you to make up your own mind. Let us know down in the comment section what you think. Do you think H.H. Holmes was Jack the Ripper? Or do you think we're just some crazy, dumb rednecks that don't know what we're talking about? Could be. Love you guys. Catch you on the next one. Till we speak to you again. Love many, trust few, and do harm to none. God loves you, and so do we. Bye-bye.